Current theories of development have moved on, and we now have some major fields of study. One of them being the cognitive development. Cognitive development is going to, the main person here is Piaget. And what we're looking at in cognitive development is the development of your mind, your structures, how you actually reason, how you logic. When you hear cognition, think of mental processes. Everything that we as humans are capable of doing that, let's say, the animals can't do. And when I talk about cognition, I often talk about the frontal lobes of the brain. And the frontal lobes are important for memory, for concentration, for attention, for strategies. Even when you're sitting down right now listening to me and trying to figure out how you're going to take notes and what you're going to study in the book, that is cognition. Anything from texting to trying to remember to do something tomorrow, working on your laptop. These are all cognitive processes. So anything that requires learning from your mistakes, planning ahead, strategies, all of that is considered to be cognition. Other theorists are going to focus more on the social-cultural aspect. And that will again be the influence of the social, milieu, really. So children from different parts of the world, do they all learn to read at the same rate? Do they learn how to read the same? Are the processes the same in all of us? Or are they different depending on the culture within which you grow up? Again, spatial skills might be different depending on whether you're growing up in Canada or whether you're growing up in India or somewhere in Europe. So do we all develop the same, or is the culture and the language in particular? Think about if you speak a different language. Most of us speak English and French. Do you actually think differently when you are thinking in the two different languages? So that's what the social cultural perspective looks at, is the influence of the environment and the culture in particular on the differences among children. So that will be another field that you'll be looking at throughout the course textbook. We then have the environmental approach, and the environmentalist approach is pretty much behaviorism. When you hear environmentalist, think of behavior, people like Watson and Skinner, and for them it was all about, again, the environment writing on you, coming from, again, the echo of John Locke, where you're born with, a blank slate. And the behaviorists work on the idea of you don't have to go in and sit down with a child and say, tell me what you're thinking. Why are you doing this? Tell me what you're feeling. For them, if you couldn't observe and control and manipulate a particular variable, then it had no place in the field of science. They were trying to take psychology away from philosophy, because that's where we started, was in philosophy. And for them, that was kind of fluffy. You couldn't see it, you couldn't control it, you couldn't measure it. Like the sciences, the hard sciences, where you actually saw the things they were studying. So they were trying to make psychology a science. And in order to do that, they had to get away from that mind stuff, which for them had no place in a scientific inquiry. So they pretty much focused on behavior. So if I can see you doing something and find out what is rewarding that behavior, in other words, a child does something, they get a cookie or they get praise, the child will do it again. And as far as trying to inhibit behavior or stop behavior, when a child isn't doing something or you're trying to get a child to stop doing something, it's punishment. Now, in the behavioral view or in the environmentalist view, punishment doesn't mean you're slapping or any kind of corporal punishment. It could, but it mostly is a term that they use for trying to inhibit any kind of behavior. So if you make a joke and nobody laughs at you, that in behavioral terms is also punishment. So anything that stops you from performing the behavior in the future is punishment in learning terminology. So we'll be coming back to that again in future chapters, and we'll be talking about reinforcement and punishment in the different types. So that again will be a different theoretical perspective that we'll look at in the course. The last one I want to talk about is the evolutionary and biological approaches. And these again are looking at evolution, that we have adapted certain processes, certain mechanisms that allow us to adapt to a changing environment. For instance, language. We've come a long way from being primates and walking around on all fours. The gift of language, the gift of enhanced memory, working in social groups, enables us to adapt to a changing environment. And that, of course, is coming from an evolutionary perspective like Darwin. Again, people who are more in the ecological approach, and ecology is looking at how the organism evolves in its natural habitat. So again, things like imprinting, which we'll talk about later on, the fact that a little duck will follow the first thing it sees in the first 24 hours. So again, we have these natural innate tendencies there, and they follow through in the environment because they serve some adaptive mechanism. They help us to survive.